Let's take away at some ways to utilize Power Query and some of the options that are available within it to transform data just within it. So first off, we have our round function here that occurs. You can round up or you can round down under this transform area. So for instance, we can round on these different functions. So let's go back to the source data. So I'm just going to duplicate this that I have, and I'm going to go back to where before we did a roundup, right? So before the roundup, you can see that it immediately changes it, and then we right click it, and then we can see that transform round. And a round kind of does the same here. So we took round, and then we could round. That's what I recommend using. It's more precise. So if you're going to round, you can do 2, and that's going to round that by 2 decimal places, which isn't going to change anything, right? But maybe you want to round by 1, and that's going to leave your 1 there. So not a lot's changing either. So in this situation, you may decide I want to round by 0, and then we have that 0 there. So units sold, that could be misinterpreted. So you kind of have to think about that and maybe talk to the business owners or stakeholders that you're talking to on those ones. But we also have the round down, so we can go over there. So let's go back and we could see, okay, what do we got to do here? I want to round down. So we click the round and we click round down. So we're rounding down, which is immediately wiping everything. And then we have the round up. So this 1618 would then turn to 1619 if we round it up. So you see that right there. So that's one of the things that you have to watch out for when it comes to this stuff is you got to make sure you're really doing the right things with rounding. So rounding is one of those things that kind of just comes up as you're going. Um, and it's kind of like something that can hurt you on the currency side. So let's back up even further to where we get to the entire source. We removed a lot of columns earlier, right? So we're going to go down and we're just going to look at these other columns. So we don't really have the decimals except for that one area. But let's say this gross sales is here, right? We got some decimals. They're in here, but behind the scenes we see it's 0.5. Watch out for that because when it comes from Excel, it can sometimes be different. So we see that. But if we go right here, we can see that it's currently a decimal. So maybe since it's currency, it should have really been a fixed decimal. And we're going to replace that current step. And that's really what it should be. So a lot of these things that come through as decimals, you may want to watch out for that. Decimals have like a higher precision, but really currency is still good enough. It goes to 4 decimal places. So you're going to get pretty good rounding precision unless in those situations, but always verify and look at that documentation. But it really gives you a good idea because a lot of these things are coming across as decimals when they're fixed decimal, which is the currency one for Power Query. So just be watching that as you're going over there and doing these types of things. You can also see here like month name, month number, those are coming in as wholes. Whole numbers, like they come in as the lowest level, so they're going to be the most performant. If you have something as a string here, it could be less performant. So if we look at cardinality, columns like this, if they were strings, less performant, things like that, then you go down into certain things. But there's not a lot of cardinality here going on. There's not a lot of issues going on in regards to this. But we have this discount band. We only have 4 categories. Now, cardinality means just like the differentiation in a row. So, like if you have a ton of rows here, there's some more cardinality going on. So, if you get into billions of rows, clearly that's going to become an issue, but that not in this case. So, clearly the profile of this is not that big of a deal. There's only 700 rows in the starter data set that Microsoft provides. So, let's go in a little bit deeper and take a look at how we could handle some of these things with rounding and currencies. So clearly we're using whole numbers, percentages. We can take a look at that. We don't currently have any percentages in here, so that's good. But let's say, for instance, we wanted to see gross sales divided by units sold or something like that. How will we do that to deal with kind of some rounding situations using kind of the built-in interface? So let's take a look real quick. So if we add a column, you can come up here and add a column. And when you add that custom column, we'll put it right here. So here you have all your kind of stuff that you can do calculated columns on. So when these load in to Power BI, they'll already be pre-calculated. So that's one great thing here. So let's say if we did units sold divided by, you could just do the divided sign divided by sales price, and we can see what we get. Um, and we'll just name it test for now, and we're going to bring that in so you can get that to get the units sold divided by that sales price within that column. So that's kind of a cool thing you could do if you want to do some additional math. And then this is a situation I want to just talk about this. So you see like all these additional digits that occur. You probably don't want to bring those all in. They just take up space in Power BI, especially if you start getting into major stuff. So you're going to want to use that fixed decimal most likely. And you can see it kind of brings it down to that precision. It's 4 digits precision, and it puts it in something a little bit better for you, because you're not going to need all those decimals most likely now. And it's going to be a little bit more better for you bring it into Power BI. So as you can see, that's just one way you can get at the front of this, because Power Query is a preparation tool. That is the goal. And then when we load this data back into Power BI, which we can do real quick, we can eliminate these columns, and we can eliminate these columns because they're not going to be loaded in. And you can see it's grayed out. We'll load that financials twos in, and then we'll get all that data. Now this is going to stop working. Do you know why it stopped working? Let's talk about it. So we fix it, right? Because we lost our values. So we had country and I believe something else. It doesn't really matter, but we could say discounts. So which country is getting the most discounts? Okay, we can see that. But then we now have that new test column in there. So maybe we can take a look at that and we can see, okay, the test column's in there. All right, so we have that. So Canada's kind of got that, the items that we were talking about. So the only catch is here, you can't see the formula in Power BI. It's just being brought in, so you have to name it. You can't name it test. You got to name it properly, but it is a way to get that in there. So those are those calculated columns you can bring in and things like that. Just be really careful because like sometimes it will sum it when you bring it in. You may want to be more explicit on what's going on here. Just be careful with what Power BI is doing with these different things. That's one thing to watch out for if you do that. And but I think that kind of takes care of those rounding errors that you can run into and other things. Of course, profit and things like that are things that are already in here, so you have that. Discounts and things, but now you can bring different things in and kind of take a look at them and see, what do they look like and different scenarios. So there's just a lot you can do with Power BI from that perspective and getting that data back over from Power Query. Now, one of the nice things about Power Query is it tends to just stay open. So like, let's say we just want to apply something. So I put that test column in there, and then I put just country in there for now. And then we see that, right? Well, I can just go back to Power Query. You'll notice that it's still open. Power Query is still open. In Excel, it doesn't do that. It closes, and it's kind of annoying. But in Power BI, it stays open. And that's a huge benefit of Power Query and Power BI. It's faster, and it stays open. So all you got to do is hit, let's say we change something. Let's just remove this column right here. Remove it out. We right-click it. We click Remove. And then you can see a lot of stuff. Right click here, you got a lot of different things you can do. But we close and apply, right? So it's going to run immediately. And we can click refresh, and that's going to update. Now we don't have the column in the visual, so it didn't update in the visual. But behind the scenes, that column is now gone. So there's just one way you can quickly do stuff and keep things going and really make things swell, basically. So that's kind of just how some tips and tricks that you can use for Power Query. Power Query is a really robust tool. I recommend learning this because if you're not profiling your data, you're in trouble. Like, you're in trouble. There's just something that's going to go wrong. You're not going to know if you drop a value in a join or whatsoever, and this is the way to do it and protect yourself if you don't have access to the SQL database and you can't make those SQL joins, or you just want a simplified interface for a simple data set. Now, I'm not talking about like a tool ETL and you're just pushing 50 million rows in. You could probably still do it. Power Query is made for that and processing that data, but it's a way to transform your data, similar to how Python will transfer it. Python's not extremely fast in most cases, unless you're using like NumPy, But in most cases, Python's a little bit sluggish. You're using pandas and you're using the data frames. Well, this is very similar to Python. It doesn't work as much like SQL. It works like Python. It's there to transform the data and really bring it in Power Query as a visual interface. And then, of course, you can go back here. You can look at the code. Everything that's going, we come from this source file. This is the built-in sample file built in Power BI. I just think it's interesting. It comes from Microsoft program files. So that's where that's coming from. And then we also see that, hey, we got a financials table here. And then it comes with the data. And then we have some change types. It tells you what we changed. We added a custom column that we just talked about, the units sold divided by sales price. Then we change the type. So it's all in order, sequential steps. And finally, the last step is always the end statement. Don't miss that. But that let statement is similar to let in Excel. It's very similar. Sometimes it'll even work, but it's very similar to how that works in Excel. So practice those in Excel if you don't use Power Query. But if you use Power Query, it will do a lot of the upfront lift for you. So it's an automated process. And that's just one video on Power Query. I may do more. I really like this program. I use it for a lot of stuff within my own personal job. And I think you'll find it to be extremely helpful if you just start using this interface. So all you got to do is go up to transform data, transform, or get data, and add all this different data that you can get from pretty much anywhere, PDFs, all that. You can do it. You can even do Word docs. Like, this thing's insane what it can do and transforming pretty much anything. So lots of great stuff there.